This is Defenders TV Podcast episode 74, where we are looking at Luke Cage's 101. Welcome back, Defenders, to this episode of Defenders TV Podcast, episode 74, where we are looking at the 101 of Marvel's comic character and soon to be Marvel's Netflix character, Luke Cage. Obviously coming off the back of Jessica Jones and Daredevil Season 2. This is all leading to the 30th of September, where it will be dropped globally by Netflix. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek. Yeah, really looking forward to Luke Cage, the TV show. But we're going to be talking about the 101, the basics and knowledge that you'll need to know for Luke Cage.
And don't forget, guys, I'm here too. I know. I kind of felt like this. I wanted to make it a surprise, almost like. And Chris is here too. Don't worry. Hey, guys.
Welcome on board, Chris, too.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to jump in as well. Really looking forward to this. Luke Cage
definitely.
covers.
I think in many respects, this is probably going to be our 101. I mean, for me personally, I do know him from his association with Iron Fist, and obviously the Heroes for Hire. But after that, I've got a lot to learn about Luke Cage, and in some ways, it will be useful for the show, just to have that sort of one step removed from the character, really learning more about the character during the 13 episodes.
For myself, I'm actually not gonna lie. I'm kind of I've always known Luke Cage from more peripheral, like secondary character to a lot of. So he is a New York based hero, so he did get a lot of crossover with Spider-Man the odd time, and then, especially during Civil War, he became very prominent in the comic book arc. So the Secret Avengers. From my read through of Alias and kind of following that, he's in there as well. And then actually at that point, post Civil War, we had the New Avengers, and he was one of the kind of members of that. So, for me, that was this. I am coming in kind of like a newborn too. I'm quite interested. I'm more like, this is gonna be. It's almost like a daunting thing. I'm like, I'm scared, but it's kind of like Christmas Eve for me right now, because I'm kind of like, it's coming. I'm excited, but I'm also nervous. What if I don't get the presents I want?
So it's a sweet Christmas, basically.
Oh my God, it is Sweet Christmas.
Sweet Christmas.
Yeah, this is a bit of a threefer, actually. This is probably the least known character of the four Defenders for me as well. Very much knew him from comic books for years. You know, he's been around since the 70s. So, he's always appeared in comic books, but I've never really read any of his solo titles up until a couple of months ago, when I started doing a bit of a reread during the summertime of this year. So after Jessica Jones. So my version of Luke Cage really has been the Mike Coulter version. He's the one that I probably know better than the comic book version up until I started rereading. So I think it's going to be a really interesting show for the three of us to look at.
Interesting, definitely. And I think as well, before we start, just to avoid any confusion for anyone who's maybe listening in thinking that 101 is for season 1, episode 1 of the Marvel Netflix Luke Cage. No, this is a 101 in the sense of his creation, his origin. We're going to go through his allies, affiliations, partnerships, to his enemies and antagonists, and obviously look at some of then maybe publications or where we've seen him in other media, such as obviously Jessica Jones on Netflix as well. Mm-hmm. So this is not a review of season 1, episode 1 of the Marvel Netflix show that drops on the 30th of September. So just to make sure from the outset that you're clear. However, the one thing maybe that we do need to highlight is it could be possible spoilers for the actual show. I mean, we are thinking that this show will go very close to the origins of Luke Cage, and how he becomes Power Man, or the Man with Unbreakable Skin. Mm-hmm. So actually within this, just to forewarn you now, there may be some spoilers about what happens in the 13 episodes with regards to his origin and how he gets that.
Absolutely. If you remember from Jessica Jones, a lot of his backstory was kept completely secret. He was known as the kind of local bartender, womanizer. You saw a bit about his wife, Reva, and a little bit of his backstory. But even questions that were asked to him about his history, he just kind of batted them away and ignored them. So, I definitely feel that the Cheo Coker version on Netflix, which is coming out on the 30th of September, is going to really take inspiration from the 70s book. And it seems like from the trailers that we've seen anyway, there's a couple of really nice nods to that version of Luke Cage. So be forewarned, there will be a couple of things that could be considered spoilers, but again, we haven't seen any episodes of Luke Cage just yet, so we don't know if any of these are spoilers.
Also, just to get it clear as well in the mind of myself and probably anyone who's listening, these are the events as well that are going to happen in the Luke Cage show, and they happen after Jessica Jones.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about that on one of our previous podcasts as to when it was going to take place, but very specifically, this happens after he loses his bar, loses his job in Jessica Jones, and goes back kind of tail between the legs to Harlem.
Okay, so basically some of those images that we've seen that sort of hint at his origin are more than likely going to be in flashback.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the same way as we kind of saw in Jessica Jones, where we saw her flashback to and her previous life with the Purple Man, and obviously with another Luke Cage character that she killed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There'll also probably be more spoilers for Jessica Jones during this podcast as well.
Yeah. Didn't think that would happen, did you?
Right, before we get into Luke Cage, let's just do one final reiteration of our competition. We have our off-season competition that's going on at the moment. It is all Doctor Strange related because everything also leads to Doctor Strange's release now on the 25th of October in the UK and Ireland.
My birthday. Woohoo!
That's right.
They actually obviously must have known.
They must have.
They just must have.
But if you want to enter our competition, all you need to do is leave us a review over on iTunes and pop us on an email to feedback@DefendersTVPodcast.com, giving us your name and where you left your review. We can't pick up every single review that comes up on iTunes, unfortunately. So there's been a few that we've seen in other countries, places like Denmark, where we've got a lovely review there, which we wouldn't have seen unless we got the email from the person who left it. So thank you so much to those of you that have left a review. The competition itself will be open till about the 28th of September, and we will record the winner for the release of our Luke Cage episode 1 review, which will come out on the 30th of September. We hope. Cross fingers for that one. But it should be out on the 30th of September. So please like and share, obviously, the podcast. All you need to do to leave a review on iTunes, just go to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, pop onto it, log into your iTunes account, leave us a little review, and then pop us on an email. Without further ado then, guys, I think it's time to get into Luke Cage 101.
Absolutely. I think we will kick off with the creation of Luke Cage, who was created in 1972. The first issue of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, I hasten to add, not Heroes for Hire. His real name was Carl Lucas, raised in Harlem. And he's also known, obviously not within this comic, but it was a solo hero for hire, also known as Power Man. So he does have a few other names associated with him, but he was introduced as Luke Cage here in this 1972 comic. It was created by Archie Goodwin, who was the writer. Mm-hmm. And then the artists were John Romita Jr. and George Tusker, both artists on this new creation for Marvel.
Absolutely, yeah. And it can't really be taken away from the actual origin of the character. This was right in the middle of the blaxploitation explosion in the US when you had characters like Shaft in the cinema. A big kind of a big thing to happen in cinema, really, in the US. So they decided to kind of bring that character into Marvel comic books, very much like things like, Iron Fist was created in the time when Kung Fu was very popular. Shang-Chi was very popular because, again, of the martial arts that were going on at the time in the 70s. So this is where Luke Cage came from. This is where his background is. Yeah,
a lot of these characters respond to cultural events going on, certainly in the US, at the time. And this is no different. To be honest, this really does come from that whole era of blaxploitation movies, of the TV shows showing gritty cop dramas. But as well, I mean, we do have it coming out of, the civil rights movements as well, and all these different, cultural and social aspects all blending together. And of course, Marvel, like DC, like any other kind of medium, it is responding to those events. And for Marvel, it's the creation of characters that reflect some of these things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But but the character's origin then, how does Luke Cage come about? How does this man become the man with the unbreakable skin who angle grinds his abs for pleasure?
Actually, his first issue comic is actually quite a large size issue. There's a lot that goes on before he gets to creation. It's not like, the atom bomb drops and he's suddenly Luke Cage. I really do like his origin story. So as you mentioned, John, he was born Carl Lucas and raised in Harlem. He grew up in juvenile homes and worked with the criminal element in the Harlem area. Kind of just some basic crimes, knocking over a shop here and there. But he was working for the most part with his best mate, Willis Stryker. Willis went down a different path and became a much bigger criminal within Harlem. But Luke turned away from that and turned kind of against that whole criminal element, as he grew up. Eventually, unfortunately, he had an argument with Willis Stryker over a woman. Sadly, this woman is Reva Connors, who we know from Jessica Jones, his wife in the Jessica Jones series. She was in the original issues of the comic. But because of this fight over a girl, Reva Connors, who Willis believed that Luke had turned against him, he plants heroin in Luke Cage's apartment, and Luke gets arrested and sent off to prison, making his way to Seagate Prison on a life sentence. While there, he has really unfortunate luck. He gets pretty much abused and targeted by a sadistic guard, which is Billy Bob Rackham, or Albert Billy Bob Rackham. Constantly under that pressure, Luke gets the guard put on notice, and is blamed by him for a demotion, effectively.
No, it's really interesting. I love this kind of origin of Luke Cage. I like the struggle that he has to really assert himself in this world. And I kind of like the villainous slant that he potentially could have gone down as well. This idea that he does dream of following Willis Stryker and being in this kind of racketeering gang and being he is also a member of a gang called the Rivals. I love the fact that there is this kind of history that is a bit ambiguous for Luke Cage, and it comes back a bit again, even with his best friend Iron Fist as well, where he slightly betrays Iron Fist when when Heroes for Hire trying to reform. It's all with the Master of the World series, and with Heroes for Hire. But I love that slant to Luke Cage's character that he could have gone another way, and it's been this battle and struggle. And even when he's been as I say, gone to Seagate Prison, you have him again just finding the worst of luck by having a real sadistic, sort of psychotic guard who ultimately triggers the path that he goes down on and who he becomes. But I really like this side of Luke Cage, and I'm hoping that it comes out certainly in the Netflix show.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other weirder elements, I suppose, for Luke is that while he's stuck in prison, he also is experimented on by Dr. Noah Burstein, who experiments on him with the same kind of super soldier serum that was used to create Captain America. So quite interesting. A little bit of an advancement to it, slight change to it after 30 years of being in development after the creation of Captain America. So once again, the super soldier serum is responsible for the creation of another character in the Marvel Universe, which I really like. But what makes it unusual is that Billy Bob Rackham, the wronged, or he feels wronged security guard, is the one that basically messes with all the dials, turns them all up to 11 while Luke is under, during these experiments. And it turns him into Power Man. It has a much bigger effect on him, than it did on Captain America. So interesting little touch there. You wonder, is he stronger than Captain America after these experiments? Because it's had a much greater effect on him. But he uses that to break out of prison. He walks through a wall effectively, breaks out of prison, goes off to Harlem and changes his name from Carl Lucas to Luke Cage, and sets up Heroes for Hire. Again, another really unusual thing in the Marvel comic books. This is a guy that's basically saying, well, I'm now superpowered. People need superpowers. I need money. So I'm going to set up a company. And if you can pay me, I'll save you. basically, and that's the character. So very different for the Marvel Universe.
And that filters through his character as well. Like in Defenders, he kind of almost tells them to go run and jump, that he can't do this anymore because he's got bills to pay and he's not getting paid to be a defender. And there's all that he's defending the Earth against all this weird stuff that is totally out there for him because, you know, he is a street level hero at heart. But I think Nighthawk, one of the other members of Defenders, puts him on retainer, pays him a wage so that he can still be in Defenders. So this kind of, this notion that, you know, it's important to earn a wage and be employed is really important for Luke Cage. And I think it's one of those other like fascinating things that really grounds this character. He is, to all intents and purposes, a working man from Harlem and wants to earn money to live and to just, you know, live in his community. And even when part of the Defenders, he's like, I'm not getting paid for this and I've got bills to pay effectively. And they put him on retainer. So fantastic.
I love that idea because you look at obviously Iron Fist, Iron Man and Doctor Strange, and all three of them are multi-millionaires who have tons of money. You know, it's, that's kind of the standard. You wonder where they get all their money to do this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, they were left it by their parents is basically it. Whereas Luke, a guy who's been in and out of juvenile homes, gets sent to prison, comes out of prison and then goes, right, I'm setting up an agency now. People can pay me to do this work. Great idea.
I'm kind of interested now in the upcoming Netflix show. He's now down and out on his luck now after losing things. So I'm assuming he's going to come home back to Harlem and literally go straight hero for hire. Basically, there'll be something he'll go, like, I'm assuming it's going to be like he'll stop a robbery in a shop or something and then they'll offer him money and he'll go, oh, and takes the money and then becomes the hero for hire. Then he'll have a soul search and go, I should really be doing this for better things. And then he'll start doing it for free.
Or he'll just hire on more people to join his agency that'll be hired out for different jobs, you know?
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, from the comics and obviously within the trailer of Luke Cage that we've had where he's in the shop, I think it's, is it a Chinese takeaway or a Chinese restaurant, kind of street food restaurant, where, he's protecting that shop against those criminals that are trying to obviously rob the cash register. But that does happen in the comics. I think that is also lifted out. That's exactly where he gets his idea of being that hero for hire, right. In that they offer to pay him for saving their business and so on. And he's willing to take it because, as you say, he is a working man. He needs to earn money to buy the house, pay the bills, and ride the bike. It's kind of that kind of simple. So it's really interesting. And I just wonder whether that scene is kind of, that reflection of one of the comic arcs.
Yeah,
so it'd be really interesting.
Very interesting. Chris, do you want to talk about the actual powers of Luke Cage? We know that he's got unbreakable skin basically from the TV show. What's the overall powers of this, of the character?
Luke actually possesses superhuman strength and stamina. And then it goes on that his actual skin and muscle tissue is like so extremely dense that it kind of gives him this high resistance to physical injury.
Right.
And basically, as you said, it's the cellular regeneration experiment, the super soldier experiment that kind of fortified all the tissues and the lungs and everything in his body. And initially from the first experiment, he actually only had this kind of stamina and regeneration and the actual kind of bulletproofness. And then at a later stage in the comics history, he then got a second exposure.
Right.
And got which enhanced his strength to a greater piece. So actually this leads into a question, but I'll put a pin there right for a second.
Okay.
And then basically also he has a faster than normal, but I think we've seen the word 3x somewhere. Recovery time from his injuries. But what I'm actually kind of interested in is we have yet to see him have super strength really. In what I would consider he's bulletproof and he can bend things because he's so strong. So I'm wondering is potentially this arc, the series, the 13 episodes, is where he's going to get super strength. He'll get a second dose, and he'll get that bit more.
Yeah, I would say ripping a car door off is pretty super strong.
Punching through walls, pretty strong.
But
Well,
I know
it
what you
depends.
mean.
It is Harlem, so like it's probably like kind of like not Stonewall. We're talking kind of plasterboard. So like no, okay.
But maybe, like, I mean, we definitely saw in Jessica Jones that Jessica can equal his power at the moment. So, you know, he is superhuman with regards to that, but maybe we do see him have another, dose of the serum, and maybe what we've seen where it looks to be the initial experiment, maybe that's his second experiment or recharge or reboot of the serum into his body, because it's either a flashback or it's another dose of this serum. So maybe that's not beyond possibility. Definitely.
Yeah.
It depends what that scene is. Is it a flashback or is it something in the present of Luke Cage's life?
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see that. Definitely.
Yeah. I will say in the research for this episode, we did rewatch the fight scene between Jessica Jones. So it is a bit fresher, in my mind, cause we only watched it about half an hour ago, actually.
Okay.
But it's quite interesting seeing that those two characters were fighting, and it was very much showing that he is equally powered, to Jessica Jones. So however strong you think she is, Luke is pretty much exactly equal, because you see them pushing each other back and forth no further. They don't throw each other over, unless caught unawares kind of thing. So maybe he just has this in his head going, well, I want to be stronger than her, so I'll go back for one more treatment, you know?
That could be it. Yeah.
And to boot as well, he is an experienced and skilled street fighter. And part of that comes from his relationship with Iron Fist, who teaches him some martial arts, but also just the fact that, you know, he grew up within the gang rivals and that he's got the physical smarts about him to, you know, he can throw a good punch, basically, you know, in that sense, and he can look after himself. So, you know, he has those skills embedded and given then the strength, the stamina, the steel hard skin, the dense hard muscle, and bone, then definitely a force to be reckoned with, I reckon.
Even can resist the power of an angle grinder.
Absolutely.
That's pretty powerful.
It certainly is.
Very powerful.
On the TV show, Chio Coker, the showrunner for the show, has called the type of fighting style that Luke Cage does, he's called it smack fu, which I like. So this is the concept that effectively he is so strong he can just throw people out of the way with a single punch. So they had to come up with some very different ways of filming it, very different ways of doing it, because it could become boring very quickly when you've got bullets just bouncing off him and everybody that attacks him just gets thrown across the room. So really intrigued to see. We've seen a bit of the fight sequence, or one of the big fight sequences in some of the trailers that have been out, but really interesting to see how they do that in the show, you know. Really excited about it. So John, do you want to give us a bit of background on some of Luke's allies? You mentioned Iron Fist as being one of his main allies.
Absolutely.
One of your favorite characters, really.
One of my favorite characters, helps to clear Luke Cage from the accusations of being, you know, a drug runner, drug handler, and all that from prison. He helps him defeat, like, I think there's one of the antagonists of Luke Cage is Bushmaster, related to another gang, the Magia, it's a European kind of syndicated gang.
Mm-hmm. I think we mentioned it before. That's like the mafia of Marvel.
Basically, and you have these two MacGyver characters, Quincy and John. Quincy being super powered, John being effectively a criminal level. So it fits in to Luke Cage's world in Harlem, and with Stryker and all the other type of criminal underworld seedy gangs that are there. You know, this is one of Luke Cage's big bads, and Luke Cage, along with Misty Knight, helped to clear Luke Cage and get the information to show that he can be exonerated, that shows he's innocent, from Bushmaster, who's trying to effectively do leverage and get some money from that. So you have them clearing him of his charges. They become best of friends. Ultimately, Luke Cage is introduced to Iron Fist through Misty Knight, who is Iron Fist's girlfriend at the time.
That's right.
Misty Knight has her own detective agency, the Nightwing Restorations, I think, which is really cool. And I like that idea that within the Netflix world as well, we're going to hopefully see this almost like alternative, detective agency in the same way as, Alias Investigations with Jessica Jones. It's bringing in that aspect, that detective and investigative work that within these street leveled heroes. Yes, they're super powered, but they have to find the chain of events and link the people to the actions. They don't just go rolling in there with the Hulk. You've got the likes of, Jaren Hogarth, who actually founds Heroes for Hire with the two-man team of Iron Fist and Luke Cage. Yeah. But yeah, they become best of friends. And I mean, there is this, I just absolutely love their dynamic within Heroes for Hire and between the two of them. You've got Danny Rand's sort of lovability, quipability, and all that. He's the one that's joking. He's kind of like setting Luke up for, some disastrous comedy fall all the time. It's really good. And it kind of contrasts with Luke's more somber notes. He's a man of the street. He's had a hard life.
Yeah.
It's not that he's not funny, but he just does it in a different way. And he's a more serious, somber person. And the two of these people kind of bounce off one another.
They're a real kind of odd couple, aren't they?
It is. It's a real odd couple, but such a really great partnership. So definitely Iron Fist, Misty Knight are huge allies to Luke Cage. Obviously we have Jessica Jones as well being a massive ally to the point that they get married and have a daughter.
That's right, little Danielle. Yeah,
little Danielle. So and that all, I think we see Danielle, we see Luke Cage in Civil War fighting on the side of Captain America on the basis that they have to retain their freedoms. He's a father as well. And that's a great dynamic to bring to a superhero, that he's a father. It's in the same with, say, House of M, I suppose, that kind of notion of a fatherly figure of Magneto. He goes a bit more evil, obviously. To Luke Cage's more, protective, father-daughter embrace. But, it's a really nice kind of, set of allies that Luke Cage has here, I think, and some really great partnerships. And I think he even has a relationship with Claire Temple. So I'm really interested to see Claire Temple within Luke Cage and just maybe some of the history that they have coming to the fore and whether it's in good spirits or maybe there's a bit of tension still there. That I'm really intrigued to see how they work the potential for post-relationship awkwardness between the two, or fun, or just, whatever it might be, how they deal with that previous relationship that they have, at least in the comics. Maybe they won't address it at all.
Yeah.
And
it might be the other way
really
around.
Interesting.
This may be his new relationships. We've got Misty Knight, obviously, in the show. There has been a relationship between Luke and Misty, in the comic books. We had Jessica, obviously, in Jessica Jones, but, she did kill his wife in that show. So, probably not going to have that long-term relationship that we've seen in the comic books just yet, anyway. And yes, we have Claire Temple, who's going to appear in the Luke Cage TV show. So, entirely possible that he could have at least two partners throughout this 13-episode series. Apart from Jessica Jones. So it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. And the final one of his major allies is really someone that's going to be in the Iron Fist series, which is Colleen Wing. We saw her first kind of shot on set this week, where she is going to be an Iron Fist, but she's another big character for Luke. She's the former housemate of Misty Knight. In fact, when they all meet each other for the first time, it's in issue 48. I was just reading them during my rereads during the summer, where Power Man is looking for Misty Knight, breaks in, has a big battle with Colleen Wing, who calls on the help of Danny Rand and Misty Knight, and that's kind of how they all meet up for the first time. So another big character for Luke. So it'd be intriguing to see if there is some kind of crossover before Iron Fist starts, with all of those characters working together in one case, or maybe that's going to be the switch over to Iron Fist, the series that's also coming from Netflix next year.
Well, that's it. I think I I don't know what you guys feel, but for me, this is one of the things of the Luke Cage, show. Because Heroes for Hire is and Hero for Hire is such an important part of Luke Cage's origin. You know, that was the title of the comic for the creation. It's, you know, to what extent, to a greater or lesser extent, are they going to introduce a Heroes for Hire element? Because in a lot of cases, you've got, you do have the people there, to form that grouping with Misty Knight, with Iron Fist, Danny Rand. You've got Luke Cage, you've got Colleen Wing, you've got Jaren Hogarth, you've got all these people established, very much so, or at least to be established with Danny Rand.
Yeah.
And, you know, to what extent will Danny Rand, be in this Luke Cage, series to set up himself and his own kind of, his own show later on, in the same way that Luke Cage was in Jessica Jones. I'm really looking forward to seeing, again, that crossover. We certainly know Claire Temple's going to be in there, but it'd be great to see what type of crossover, comes in with, in particular for me, Iron Fist and Danny Rand.
Absolutely.
Do you think we'll get Danny Rand introduced? Episode 10, 11, 12, 13, kind of just before the end?
I'm hoping we do. I'd love to see him get as big a part in the show as Luke got in Jessica Jones. Remember, he really was in the show for 4 episodes, but he did have a big impact because her storyline was intrinsically tied in with Reva Connors, and what happened with Reva in that show. So I'd like to see a big kind of arc towards the end of the season, but everything that I've seen so far of the show really tells me this is a story about Luke and Misty. It's going to be very Harlem based, and it's all about the people that are around them. So, I really don't know whether there's one huge arc that goes to maybe episode 8 or 9, and then something else kicks off towards the end of the season that's going to be completed in Iron Fist. Perhaps that's a way that could play it. But it wouldn't surprise me. I'm really hoping we don't get what we got with Luke Cage, which was, you know, a 2-minute trailer at the end of, or well, a 30-second trailer at the end of Daredevil season 2. I'm kind of hoping that we get something more than that for Iron Fist, that because the characters are so intrinsically linked in the comic books, I'd like to see him actually be involved in Harlem. But, you know, again, he hasn't been introduced anywhere else yet. We haven't seen Danny yet. So. Yeah,
and I wonder, Danny's got he does have the typical, he's a playboy before he becomes the hero, isn't it? He goes in, or did he? I'm not sure about his origin, and we'll get to that in the Iron Fist 101.
Exactly. I know John's struggling to hold back.
No, it's more Iron Fist. He is from a wealthy family.
Yes.
You know, there is wealth there. But he's effectively, he is, you know, they're involved in a plane crash, him, his father and his mother, and he is sent to and is rescued by the monks and out of Kunlun, and that's where he spends his time. So he's kind of, yes, there's this inherited old wealth, that when he comes back to New York is there for him. It's been accruing, interest left, right and center. So he is wealthy. He's wealthy. Yeah. And again, it's one of those aspects of that dichotomy between, Iron Fist and Luke Cage, that, you know, Luke is street level. He's from a poor background. Danny from a rich, but again, that they overcome that. There's a connection there between the two. So I think that's a nice little, touch to their friendship, I think, as well.
I'm going to call it now. I think we'll have a scene with Colleen and Luke just there chatting away, and then a drunken, boisterous, young Danny Rand kind of comes over pre-powers.
Interesting.
And then what we get with Iron Fist is he's been introduced as this eccentric playboy, very Oliver Queen-esque from DC prior to the accident.
Who's
he
that?
Then, that would be the Green Arrow.
Oh, yes. Currently
played by Stephen Amell in Arrow. But he's the eccentric playboy prior. He then gets, has the accident, and then we'll see him pre just coming into the accident.
Right, interesting.
I think that could be it. Because at least it would be a mistake not to at least introduce him at this point.
I'd love to see him in the show. Definitely.
Definitely.
The worry that I do have is that I think the full origin of Iron Fist is actually going to be him out of New York until he's in his early 20s. I don't think we're actually going to see, or his late teens, early 20s. I don't know whether we're going to see that appear in Luke Cage. So I don't know how they're going to work it, but I really do want to see him in the show.
But if Misty Knight's there, I think they could do that. He could be there actually with full powers, and again, then either it's a continuation on, and his background is in flashback in Iron Fist, rather than it just being from a linear tale from where the plane crashes in the mountains and so on. But they could do that as well. I mean, I think one of the other things just quickly on the Allies is that, it's not all plain sailing either. The Heroes for Hire do kind of fall apart, and this and in particular between Luke Cage and Danny Rand, that they begin to sort of separate as this mysterious government agencies must begin to manipulate them. They're obviously on the radar, the work that they do, that they work then, they begin working for consolidated conglomerates, and ultimately Iron Fist gets poisoned by radiation and is killed by a young boy called Bobby, who is someone who has an alien microorganism living inside him. As you do. A bit like Venom, I suppose, in that sense, and who that is able to change his molecular structure, and this causes Iron Fist to effectively get killed, or what they think is. But again, Luke Cage is accused of killing Iron Fist and goes on the run again. So he's suddenly on the run to Chicago, I think it is. And it's at this time where they're separated that in the comics, he sets up a bar. He sets about ridding, his neighborhood of criminal elements, once he's been exonerated, I should say, from that. There's very much this element, I think, with Luke Cage, which I really like, is that he kind of thinks that the bigger world saving, like the Avengers or all this kind of thing is maybe a bit beyond him. Right. It's best left to others, at least with regards to some of his earlier arcs. Obviously, he's involved in Civil War and so on, but even within Defenders, he comes and he goes from that on the basis that it feels, this work is best left for others. I mean, and I think lastly now in the more modern stories, we see him coming back into that, but certainly initially it really sets him and establishes him around Harlem, which is kind of really interesting. I like that notion because, again, it's going to be one of those things where, Danny Rand is this world-wide kind of figure. Luke Cage may be more concentrated on his own neighborhood, and how that works. So, that should be really, really good. But yeah, you can't ever rule out a kid that can change his molecular structure and an alien microorganism to really get thrown into the mix and change everything up.
You never know. What they'll do on Netflix, it just could be anything. You never know. They could have.
I suspect it. I mean, that's not going to happen, but it's within the comics, and so on. So it's kind of interesting. It's just to say, it isn't always plain sailing for the two of them.
Absolutely.
And of course, ultimately in the, when Heroes for Hire come back together and they try and get Luke Cage back on, he doesn't want to be a part of that. And he only comes back in. And again, it links to this Master of the World where he actually spies on Heroes for Hire, sort of against Danny Rand and the Iron Fist. And so there's tension there between the two, which is good as well, I think. And ultimately, Heroes for Hire becomes an all-female group.
That's right. Led by Misty Knight.
Yeah. So, a really cool little evolution and development of the Heroes for Hire from a hero for hire through to an all-female Heroes for Hire. So, a nice little change in that group.
And I think that's a lot of the comic book talk. There's anything else that we want to throw into just the comic book side of things? I know a lot of his antagonists seem to be very local to Harlem and seem to be people that he's had a lot of history with in the past. So people like Stryker, people like Cottonmouth, who we're going to see in the TV show, they haven't had huge arcs outside of the Luke Cage comic books. Any particular antagonists that we would be aware of, or? Well,
I've mentioned the Bushmasters, the two MacIvors, but again, that's criminal. I think we have, Scimitar, actually, who, again, that's more to do, again, with Heroes for Hire, because Scimitar serves Master Khan, who is one of Iron Fist's sort of big bads.
Right.
So, I mean, again, just that connection between Iron Fist and Luke Cage exposes Luke to a lot of Iron Fist's own sort of enemies
Right.
and villains.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like in the early issues of Luke Cage, he was very much after the people he grew up with, the people who were destroying Harlem in his mind. He was going after those gangs that had been flooding the streets with drugs. Those were his villains to begin with. And then as he combined him with Iron Fist and him with the Avengers and all the different variants of them, he kind of took on kind of going up against all of their villains. But his own villains are very much street level and very much Harlem based, villains for the most part.
Definitely. But having said that, we do have Darklove, who is a demon, who kills Harmony Young, who again is another, Luke Cage goes after Darklove in effectively revenge of Harmony Young's death and killing.
Interesting.
But I suspect we won't see that either in the show.
Okay.
And of course then, after going from, extraterrestrial demons like Darklove, there is the criminals, as you say, from Harlem, but also from Seagate Prison. So we have Discus Stiletto, Shade, who's going to be in the show.
That's right.
And Comanche, all criminals that Luke encounters during his incarceration in Seagate Prison.
Very good. Very good. So after all of that kind of 101 ideas, guys, any particular recommendations for our listeners for comic books to read? I know for myself, I'd highly recommend the first issue of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire #1. It's a really good storyline at the opening of this comic book, and it does stand alone. There's not many connections to the rest of Marvel at the time. So a really good book, which you can get reasonably cheaply over on Comixology. You can also read for me again, another really good one is the first meeting of Iron Fist and Luke Cage in issue 48, 49, 50 and 51 of Luke Cage. Really good story arc and you get to know their relationship and who a lot of these characters are. Chris, any ones from you?
Yeah, so there's a nice kind of 2-issue arc of Fantastic Four. I think it's like Fantastic Four 168 to 170, where Luke Cage joins the Fantastic Four because they have a depowered thing.
Interesting.
Which is it's just a nice little kind of funny one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the actual original Power Man and Iron Fist kind of series. So I think there was like 120 something of those. I'm not sure. There's a fair of them. But then kind of more into the kind of, when I started kind of hearing peripheral parts of him, was like the 1997 reboot of Heroes for Hire, where it's him and he brings back the tiara, and it was back that time where Roger Stern and kind of, I can't remember the artist's name, but that's very kind of square jawed kind of art style. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I like those ones. Obviously Alias.
Of course.
If you haven't read it yet, please do.
I think I'd recommend that every episode that we do Defenders 2 podcast. If you haven't read Alias, go read it now. Why are you listening to us? Pause us. Go read Alias and come back.
The Max series had called, what was it, Cage?
Cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was really good. And then kind of the newer stuff for me would be very much Civil War, where he's Secret Avengers, that kind of arc. Then you have where he goes on to form the New Avengers post-Civil War. That was always a quite good one. And then for if you really, really, really want to kind of go right up to date, the Mighty Avengers is the new one, the new arc that I do like. And then I'm going to throw two final bits in, which I always, cause I like some of the more stranger ones. Marvel Zombies.
Oh, classic.
Cause he's in that and he actually is a fantastic character in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for fans of the Ultimate Universe, he's in the Ultimate Defenders.
Right.
Which is pretty cool because he's actually he's not powered in that, but later gets his powers from Loki and goes on to form the Ultimate Defenders with a few of them.
Interesting. Yeah, some great recommendations there.
Yeah.
John, any other ones for me?
Well, I mean, definitely Alias for me and the Hero for Hires, as Chris has already kind of mentioned. Mm-hmm. Again, other cameos where he's with Iron Fist, certainly, and it'll help people get into the Iron Fist as well, is the Immortal Iron Fist collected editions as well. Absolutely. Where he's the but at least in the New York based aspect of the series, we have Luke Cage and as well Misty Knight. Similar to Chris as well, the Marvel Max Cage 5 issues, nice and succinct. But again, it's, dark level, adult themed. It'll be interesting, to see, whether the tone of that crosses into, the Marvel Netflix. And two others in alternative continuities is the Marvel Noir. I think you picked that up at New York Comic Con last year. Looking at, blending film noir, Pulp Fiction, again, around his origin, really interesting if you're a fan of that kind of material. And of course, House of M, purely because House of M is a fantastic alternative continuity anyway. But within that, Luke Cage forms a crime syndicate. And again, it's this element of the dark side sort of Luke Cage that he wasn't necessarily predisposed towards this path of being a hero for hire, but that he forms this crime syndicate within House of M. But ultimately, it later turns into a human resistance movement against the mutants.
That's right.
Really, really cool little idea there. And of course, it links you in with House of M, which is a huge event piece, which was fantastic.
Brilliant book. I think that's enough for the comics side of things. Our next episode, obviously, is going to be out on the 30th of September, all about the first episode of Luke Cage, the TV series. So maybe it's time to have a little discussion about the TV show, guys?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. What we think is going to happen. So first off, obviously, we have mentioned a couple of times now that Luke Cage was obviously in the Jessica Jones TV series. So where we kind of left him after that show is that he knows, that Jessica's killed, Reva Connors. As we said earlier on, spoilers for that show. But he's kind of been left with no home, no job, his bar has been blown up by Kilgrave. He's told the audience and he's told Jessica that he's got the powers from a failed experiment. So that's why we believe that the show itself is going to cover that failed experiment. And he's met Claire Temple. So that big character in the comic books for him, someone that he did have a relationship with, he's already met her in the TV show. So she's now going to carry across to Harlem with him. We know he's got a cool bike.
Very cool bike. Still wears a crash helmet though.
That's right. But
I suspect that's because of legal requirements.
I'd say so.
Get pulled over.
He'd keep getting pulled over by the cops.
Exactly.
Unless he was in South Carolina, in which case he could also carry a gun.
That's true. He doesn't need a gun. He's bulletproof. He can just use his fists to punch.
Yeah, but his enemies aren't.
That's true. Very good point.
I'm not saying he goes around shooting himself. Or angle. Well, he needs a holster for his angle grinder.
Yeah. Just like, have you seen this? Wow, wow. It's like what was that Magic Mike, the one with Channing Tatum, where it's just like, wow, wow. That's basically what Luke Cage does. Mike Coulter just like, yo, yeah.
We have to be able to do some YouTubing because, Chris doing his angle grinding is a thing of beauty.
Oh god, yeah.
It's not quite like Magic Mike.
No. It's more like not so Magic Mike. Let's call it that. Yeah, not so Magic Mike.
So, after that experience on Jessica Jones, guys, what are your thoughts for the TV show? We've got a pretty good cast on the TV show. Do you think it's going to be any way similar? Do you think they're going to take some of Luke's character from Jessica Jones? Do you think it's going to be a very similar character, or do you think going to change it up a bit?
Personally, I think it's pretty much going to be, it's a transition that I think it's more we got a good, as you said, about 4 episodes of him. We got a very much an amuse-bouche of the different range he has, from angry to not so angry to, yeah, basically those 2 points. Angry to not so angry. And I think they need to expand on it slightly. I still love, the actor who plays him. He's a fantastic actor. He's got some great he's got great depth. So I do see this being very much the boy coming home after going to war kind of story.
Right. Mike Coulter, yeah, he was really good in Jessica Jones. I think they gave themselves a really good out in that show. I don't know whether we talked about it very much when we were doing our cover of Jessica Jones, but I think they gave themselves a really good out. The fact that Kilgrave was in control of Luke for such a long time in the show, gives them kind of a way to go, well, this isn't always how he acts all the time. A lot of those were words that were put in his mouth by Kilgrave.
Yeah.
You know, the actions that he had, the things that he did, a lot of them were controlled by Kilgrave and giving him that style. So he could be very different in the Luke Cage TV show. He could have a very different attitude than we've seen, in Jessica Jones. But I like that we've had this intro to him. I like that we know a bit of his history, and I like that we know a bit about the character. But not a huge amount. There's a lot to explore in the show.
I would agree. Like, Luke Cage is a serious character. I think he's that in the comics. And I think he is lightened by the people around him. True. I think having Misty Knight there, having Claire Temple, it was like having Jessica there. They're the things that bring the lightness to the character of Luke Cage, because they bring out the more tender moments, the more fun, the more comedy moments. And this is why, for me, I think actually it's really important that the whole Misty Knight interaction with Luke Cage. And I think, you know, the cherry on top for that is going to be that she introduces her boyfriend, Danny Rand.
Hopefully. Yes.
And that they begin, maybe, you know, the tentative steps towards being the best of friends, because I think, you know, this relationship between the two, I just hope the Netflix series don't ignore that and don't ignore the Heroes for Hire thing totally, and it just becomes a Defenders. I suspect they won't do. I'm absolutely convinced, that Danny Rand is going to show up in, this series, of Luke Cage. To what extent, we have to wait and see, but I think he's definitely going to be there. That's one of the things I'm really holding on to. I'm really just holding then on to seeing just more of Luke Cage's universe. As I said right at the start, this is something that's, I don't know that much about, and I really want to see this brought to life on the show. I really want to explore and delve into Luke Cage's, background, his world, with this show. And I think that's going to be very different from, Daredevil, certainly. I mean, a bit in the same way as with Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones was a very new thing for me.
That's right.
When we came to the Netflix, shows. I mean, yes, I'd seen, and read up, you know, leading up to that in the same way I've done with Luke Cage, but still there is an unknown quantity here for me I really want to see. And I think hopefully, yeah, as Chris said, you know, that they develop on from the, you know, the angry Luke Cage, the more angry Luke Cage, the less angry.
We got
Luke
the lover
Cage.
Luke Cage as well.
Okay.
But that was Kilgrave.
And it was angry Luke Cage. It was angry love Luke Cage. That bed did not survive.
No, it did not. No, it did not.
Those bedposts were pummeled to dust, I think.
Well, one of the other great things for the show is that obviously, as you mentioned, Claire Temple's coming over as well from Daredevil and Jessica Jones. So one of the great things it does have going for it is we now have two characters coming into this show that we know, from previous shows in form of Rosario Dawson, who I think in every review of every episode of the shows that she's been in, we've all gone, oh, isn't it great to see Claire? She's so good in this episode. She's brilliant in this episode. She's really been the heart of shows that kind of go wildly off into supernatural or superhuman, concepts. And then you bring in Claire Temple to kind of be the voice of the audience or be the voice of New York and Hell's Kitchen. So, she's now going to be in Harlem, with Luke Cage.
And will she steal Luke Cage's heart? Will we see them, hook up?
Yeah, maybe,
you know?
Maybe. They do seem to have a relationship, and she does obviously know that he is a superpowered guy. She obviously has her experience with, Daredevil and with Jessica Jones, so she can really be kind of a person to lean on for Luke, if he can't talk to other people around him, which I like. I think that's going to be a good relationship.
Will we, in fact, see Jessica Jones come into Luke Cage? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we know Claire Temple's going to be there, but I mean, the crossover potential now, you know, we got the first iteration of that with, Luke being in Jessica Jones, but I mean, Luke's show, not only can it be about him, but it can introduce the threads of Iron Fist, and it can reconnect us with Jessica Jones.
Absolutely.
And I mean, let's not forget that they managed to hide Wilson Fisk's appearance for Daredevil 2 so
Spoilers
well.
for Daredevil
I mean,
2
in
as
this
well.
day and age, it's testament to the producers and the lockdown there, because I mean, you know, could you imagine if we knew all that from the start and you're just kind of waiting for it, where it came straight from left field, you know, and that was fantastic. I mean, you know, like Christopher Nolan keeping things under wraps, I thought they did that really, really well. And maybe they've done the same here with regards to some other key figures from the Marvel Netflix world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, with Claire Temple and Rosario Dawson, I'm very much liking. I think at the beginning, I was probably more harsh on her. And the more that we've kind of seen her now across 3 seasons of different shows, she's becoming the Coulson, the Agent Coulson of the Marvel Netflix universe, where she will bring them together. She will form the Avengers Initiative or the Defenders Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And it is right. You were right when you were saying she brings the human element, the don't forget your roots part to the each of the shows. In a lot of these shows are mystical or superhero or superhuman. She brings that element, which is, I think, I don't know how they're going to do it now, because she's very much not the hospital. She's not the nurse in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 fears for this show. One being, that they disuse the characters like, Colleen Wing and Claire Temple, in that these are human, kind of protagonists. But then they'll focus less on them and more just on Luke and the kind of, the Harlem backstory. And then that leads me to my next one, which is, we live in a world now of Game of Thrones, of, ABC shows that are, and HBO shows that are very much well crafted. It's a revival of the blaxploitation type genre, where we have power and we have like some of the other shows where these who would have previously into the early 2000s and in the late 90s, they would have been side characters, and no channel would give a true view of Harlem in terms of the way it is now. It would have been overly kind of like guys with baggy pants and showing their underwear with a do-rag and kind of like gun held sideways, kind of gang, like the stereotypical kind of style. That's the, let's say, like, when I say I have a fear that they may like overuse or over stylize some of Harlem.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But to date, they have not done that. I should have trust in them that they're probably not going to do that. But again, it's always that, as a man who hates tropes, if we suddenly get a do-rag, wife beater styled kind of, clothing with baggy pants and a side held gun of a gang member, then I'm like, oh, if you do it more than once, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, I think it's one of the really intriguing things about this show, the showrunner that was chosen for it, Chio Coker. He really does seem to have his own concept of what he wants to deliver with this show. He does want to deliver the Marvel Universe's version of The Wire. That's kind of his view on it, is looking at a show that really got it right in terms of a small community in Baltimore, and he wants to transport that into a community like Harlem in New York. So it sounds like everything that we've heard, and again, most of it's promotional material, so you never know until you see it.
Yeah.
But he does seem to be very in tune with that fact that he wants to create something for today about street level characters. And he does seem to have that ability with a character like Luke Cage, who a lot of people don't know much of the backstory, much like ourselves, where he's going to be able to create the show that he wants to create, which I'm really intrigued with. Let's talk about quickly just one. I don't really want to dwell on other people's previews of Luke Cage, but one of the things that's really stood out is the character of Misty Knight. Pretty much everybody is saying that she is fantastic that Simone Missick has done a great job at Misty Knight. And the show is kind of a two-hander between her and Luke Cage, and what she does in Harlem and what he does in Harlem, and them working together, which I really like. I love the idea that this is going to be potentially another main female lead for a Marvel show. After the success of Jessica Jones, you'd think they want to greenlight every major female character in Marvel and give them all some really good writers behind them. So I'm kind of excited to see another strong female character in the Netflix universe.
Definitely. I mean, that this character is critical in this world, both in terms of Luke Cage, but also with Iron Fist and with Danny Rand, and for herself as well, as, you know, being a similarly strong woman like Jessica Jones, who is trying to do the work for her community, like Luke Cage is doing. You know, she has her own detective agency. I don't know whether that will be the case in Luke Cage, but, you know, this is again, really important connective character, and an important character in her own right, that needs to work for the shows because of that kind of keystone element to this character. So yeah, I can't wait to see what Simone Missick brings here. Definitely.
We do know she's an investigator. We know that she has a partner in that investigative agency. Frank Wally plays that character, Raphael Scarf. So we know it's taking that element from the comic book. Quickly, just about the villains for the TV show. Our biggest villain here, as we kind of sort of mentioned Cottonmouth, in the villains for the comic book. Cottonmouth is the leader of the Rivals gang that John mentioned earlier on from the comic books. But he's getting a much bigger part in the show, being played by Mahershala Ali from House of Cards. Really, really enjoying this character so far in the trailers. Really seeing a cool side of him. One of the greatest things that the Netflix shows have had so far has been the villains for their shows. And so far, Cornell Cottonmouth Stokes seems to be up there with Wilson Fisk, somebody that seems to be justifying himself as a leader within Harlem's criminal element, similar to the way Wilson Fisk did. So really excited to see those bad guys as we get into the show. We've also got Alfre Woodard, very well-known actress, going to be playing Maria Stokes, related to Cornell Stokes, obviously, from the name, but I'll say nothing more. And finally, we got Theo Rossi, who John mentioned, Shades, is playing Shades from another comic book character, one of Luke's friends, and works on the other side of the house. Overall, yeah, really good cast. Really intrigued to see this, to see what's coming up on the show.
Completely agree with you. Mahershala Ali, which I know I'm probably going to mispronounce, unfortunately, throughout our coverage, and I apologize in advance, and I will work on it. I remember him from the 1400 TV show back in the I think it was late 2000s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
He was fantastic in that, and like forever, I've always loved that actor. So as we heard, some of these previews that have started coming out now through some of the larger, kind of the IGNs, etc., that they are literally saying he is an amazing, non-spoilery obviously, but saying he is an amazing, character, and he's brought to life through this. So I'm interested. Again, I'm reserving some judgment until the very first episode, and then I'll be like, I love it! Yay!
And don't worry about mispronouncing his name, Chris. Remember, John mispronounced Vincent D'Onofrio for the first episode, and then never mispronounced it again.
I did,
once.
yeah.
So just the first episode.
I did have a problem with D'Onofrio at one stage, in terms of pronouncing his name, that is, rather than the man himself. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to Mahershala Ali's portrayal in this as Cottonmouth as well. I mean, really enjoys him in House of Cards. He's again in really an important film called Moonlight recently. The premiere of that is I think at the London Film Festival. Right. Really important kind of work that he's done, and he's just shown to be such a great actor, and I just know he's going to bring it here for Cottonmouth, so I'm really looking forward to seeing him do this. I really want to see how they deal with Shades for Thea Rossi. Just the fact, will we see him in prison together? Will there be that kind of sort of tentative, sort of antagonistic type of relationship? So be really good. I'm just so looking forward to learning more about this world.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And the final big thing really for Luke Cage, and I don't think we can leave our Luke Cage 101 without talking about it, is the music element for the show. Yeah. This has been omnipresent since the start. One of the really interesting things I found out about Cheo Coker, the showrunner, was that he was a former music journalist, which would be a very good reason why music has become such an important part for him in this show. He is known to have had the cast make up individual playlists for themselves for their characters, how they describe their characters to themselves by making, a 12-song playlist that they think represents them. He's also released every single, episode for the show. He's released the name of it, and each one of them is a song titled by the band Gang Starr from the 90s. Really interesting. I've made up a playlist which you can find on our website over at defenderstvpodcast.com of each of the 13 songs. What's interesting about them is they're all rap songs. They all have a focus of each song. And if you listen to them, I'm sure they're spoiling the central theme from some of the episodes. So as we go through our podcasts on each episode of Luke Cage, we can probably talk about the song as well that are in the episodes, because I do feel just by looking through the titles of them that there is definitely an influence, and he's chosen those songs for a reason for each episode. Which I think is a cool idea.
Cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, there's going to be performances. Obviously, Cottonmouth has a club, so there's performances within that.
That's right. Faith Evans has already been confirmed to be on the show, so they're very, very popular 90s R&B singer. So
yeah, so I mean, this will be interesting. I mean, in some ways, it's a bit like the AKA episode titles for Jessica Jones, where it was a line or a phrase used and normally an important part of that episode, and I think maybe with the song titles and the songs themselves, that they represent important parts of those episodes. So really interesting twist on that element that I think Jessica Jones introduced here. Obviously now with the Gang Starr for song titles. So really, really good.
Yeah. And finally, the music itself for the show, all the score and all the acts that are being put on the soundtrack, were all chosen by Ali Shahid Muhammad, who's formerly a member of the Tribe Called Quest, another classic Can I Kick It, one of my favorite songs of the 90s. So he's been heavily involved in all the score and all the music, along with composer Adrian Young. So, really intrigued to see what they have for us here. I'm totally conscious I'm going to be singing everything and having every piece of the soundtrack on my Spotify for months afterwards already. I'm convinced of it because I've been listening to lots of Gang Starr for the last couple of months since these episode titles have been released. So, Chris, after our Luke Cage 101, where do you think this is on the excitement scale at the moment?
I'm gonna come in at a 3.
Okay.
It would potentially be lower if I hadn't have seen Mike Coulter and Luke Cage so far in Jessica Jones to date. Mm-hmm. As I kind of mentioned already, my fear is that we will get a stereotypical, like if we will get a badly produced Wire.
Right.
But I say that, and evidence should point to the contrary, so it should be more 4 out of 5 in terms of excitement and what I think is going to be. At the moment, I'm kind of playing it safe with saying a 3.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting. In the end, we'll kind of very much, I'll know within about 2-3 episodes if this is as good as we think it may be. And if we are okay to say that, no, this will become one of our favorites because this does have the option, and potentially, especially the music element as well, gives it the potential to surpass Daredevil, in terms of kind of what people will remember about Marvel. Netflix's kind of, that the genre they've created so far.
Yeah, absolutely. John?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this, just to find more about Luke Cage, hopefully see some introduction of Danny Rand, but also just, I mean, so far, just haven't felt disappointed by anything that Marvel Netflix has done. So, I'm really excited for this, and can't wait for it to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm getting really excited now, I must say. I've kind of been monitoring everything about Luke Cage as it's coming up. Really excited to see. I think this had the potential to be on a level like Jessica Jones was, where I went into it going, this is going to be a great Marvel show, and then came out going, that was a great TV show, made by Netflix. I'm kind of hoping I'm going to have the same feeling with Luke Cage. I'm always really positive as we go into it, reviewing something. It's always really exciting to get to this starting point where we've got 13 episodes to watch, 13 hours of this brand new character really to us in this brand new world, and see what they're going to do with it. Really, really excited to see that.
Yeah, I think with that, everyone, that's our 101 for Luke Cage. You can subscribe to our podcast. Just go over to, defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, or search Defenders TV Podcast in any other good podcast catcher. Again, you can join our group on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast, and ask to come and join in the group there for discussions, and chit chat that we have over there. You can follow us on Twitter @DefendersCast. And of course, if you want to be a part of the podcast, if you want to give any feedback on any of the episodes, just send in feedback to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. You can leave it on the group, or you can leave a voicemail if you go to our website, to www.defenderstvpodcast.com. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, a place where you can leave voicemail up to 90 seconds. You can, be a part of the podcast. So again, I think with that, it's just to remind everyone that we will be back on the 30th of September. And from then, every Tuesday and Friday with new reviews of Luke Cage Season 1 as it drops on the 30th of September globally by, Netflix. So the countdown continues.
So excited. So excited.
Thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you soon.
And enter the competition.
Yes, that will close the 28th of September in time for the 30th of September draw on our review and discussion of the first episode of Luke Cage. It will go into the iconic hat of Destiny, where a hand will go in and pick at random. I can honestly say, PricewaterhouseCoopers is there to verify all results.
No, they will.
No, seriously, it goes in the hat and it gets pulled. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Sweet Christmas.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Defenders TV Podcast, a TV podcast industries production. If you want to help out the podcast and you've enjoyed listening to us, there's some really easy ways to do it. If you can share our episodes through your social media channels like Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or Google+, that gets some extra listeners into us. If you want to leave us a review on iTunes or a rating, just leave a 5-star rating, click the button, or go to iTunes through defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. We'll take you straight to our page and leave us a review or a rating there. That always helps out independent podcasts. And also, as always, we love to hear your feedback about the show's interaction with our audience is what we really, really love. So you can send us feedback to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.